right. So, hello everyone. Welcome to another expert session. Today, I'm interviewing Guilherme or Gui Athia, a seasoned executive with over 30 years of experience in corporate communication, government relations, and social responsibility across multiple sectors and continents. He has held leadership positions at global companies such as Nike and Renault Nissan, assembling leading teams in Latin America, Europe, and the Middle East and Africa. Guy is the coordinator of stakeholder capitalism at the Brussels Diplomatic Academy, where he integrates business agility with academic perspectives. He has developed and taught courses in marketing strategy and government relations for MBA and executive programs. In addition to his corporate and academic roles, he is an author and public speaker specializing in trust and governance. He offers personalized mentoring and he has developed frameworks like Get the Memo, Map, Execute, Measure, and Optimize to enhance business credibility and stakeholder relationships. Our conversation will delve into the pivotal role of trust in business operations and stakeholder management. So special thanks to our sponsor, Meet, for making this possible. Welcome. Today, I'd like to start our conversation in a different, let's say, tone. And I like to, consider your extensive experience in corporate communications and stakeholder management. I'd like you to talk about a situation where placing trust in business partner or stakeholder led to unforeseen challenges or setbacks. So perhaps how did you overcome such an experience?
Thank you, Carlos.
We start there.
There are so many situations. Trust is the foundation of any successful business, in my opinion. And working with non-transactional stakeholders, such as the government, the press, NGOs, and the society at large, trust is the fundamental, let's say, um, point to build a good relationship. So trust is the base for any kind of communication, negotiation, and influence when you are talking to anyone, especially the non-transactional stakeholders. And I have so many examples, including negotiating trade agreements on behalf of your company and industry, when you have to say, this is what we have, this is what we see, we have this kind of data, but they have to believe that you are showing everything. So one of the things that I did along for such, how can I say, for multiple occasions, I was not talking about my view or the company's view. I was I was providing objective criteria. So I was using economists and lawyers and researchers to provide data. So then you can go to the society and to the governments with something more concrete. And that is very good to build trust. So I have so many examples, Carlos, that's the,
Mhm.
let's say, the general point of view.
Yeah, no, I love it. And we'll talk about how you got to where you are today. But I think I like to take that as the segue to my next question here, and really pick your brain on the role of trust and where the world is today. Because, for example, if you take a look at the elections in the US or even in Brazil, I think there's so much lack of trust in the traditional media that people ended up voting in Trump. I'm not saying which side I'm for, but Trump won largely because of the new media, right? Like his son was behind his campaign and said that I think we should go and participate in podcasts. And I think that was a big difference in trust building and and in the success of his campaign. So what are your views on the new media and trust on lobbying and all of that?
Yeah, that's a very, very important question. I call this uh, era as the age of opinion. So we are getting information from different sources, but mainly from different opinions. I'm not saying that the formal, traditional legacy press is not based on opinions. They are, of course. But now we are getting multiple and fragmented opinions from everyone. We have 5 billion social media users providing comments and reviews every day, every hour, sometimes. So what happened in the US, it's not exclusive to America. It's happening everywhere, and it's becoming a a new challenge for politics. Trust is not in their favor right now. There is a poll, a survey called Edelman Trust Barometer from the company Edelman, PR company. I think they are running this survey for the last 20 years, if I'm not mistaken. And trust is in decline for many stakeholders, for many institutions, including the government, the press, and many other institutions. What I'm trying to say is that it's not a unique case, and if you can influence others to influence in your favor, maybe you can get some success. And this is what's going on in different platforms. Um, my point is, it's not about the message itself. It's about the media. It's about no one is checking, not no one, but it's not normal to check, oh, who's this guy saying about this kind of things? It's normal to say, well, this guy is saying something that I believe. So you are just reassuring that you are correct because you have information for everyone, and then the algorithm works in your favor.
And yeah, I just turned off my camera because my internet here is a little unstable, but you don't have to worry about yours. So I love that and completely agree with you. So before we keep on, and this is a discussion I'm passionate about, let's go into your origin story and how did you, become like a trust advisor, and tell us a little bit about how you built your career till you got to Nike and where you are today, where you're a consultant helping companies and executives, top executives build trust in an era where everyone has an opinion.
Yeah, no, it's a long story. So I'm 60 years old. But I can say I like to find a common sense between people, between institutions. And this kind of mentality developed my career in corporate affairs. Corporate affairs is a combination of corporate communication, corporate social responsibility, and government relations. And sorry, and government relations. Yes. So, as I said before, I was dealing with non-transactional stakeholders, which is difficult to prove the results. I don't. I was not trying to do so. I was trying to make my case, talking to the finance guys and knocking their doors and say, "Yeah, we have to put this in the budget, but I don't know how." So they helped me on this. Another point that helped my career to progress was providing a different scenario, not based on data or benchmarks, etc., but based on my feelings. I was calling this the paranoid scenario. Um, and, and the paranoid scenario was really about my views on things. And normally it happened frequently. So I'm not proud of this, but this is the reality. So I started working with a multinational called Alcatel in Brazil. I was the head of the department, reporting to the CEO at the age of 25. Then I moved to Renault and they come to Mercosur. Same thing, built the area. Then I moved to my own company called Institucional. I trained CEOs for 7 years. And then I joined more companies, and finally I ended up working for Nike in Brazil as the first director of government relations and public affairs. And then they invited me to join their team in Europe to manage Europe, the Middle East, and Africa. I think the most important thing here is you have to believe that what you are doing is the right thing to do, even though you don't have universal metrics. And that's the challenge for everyone in this area.
Um, so you've worked for very large enterprises, Gui, and based on this experience, what are the common the common challenges that you see that a large enterprise goes through when we're talking about trust, when we're talking about governmental relations? What's the role that you played in this company? So take Nike, for example, right? Like, do you have some concrete examples of things that, because of your work, there were you had an impact in the business, you had an impact in the business goals or in launching products? Could you be more granular about the specific things that encompass your jobs and some of the challenges that multinationals face?
That's a very important question, Carlos, and I will be very honest with you. I don't want to share information, even though, old information, because in my profession, discretion is very important. But I will tell you that on behalf of Nike, and as a part of a bigger team, we developed so many efforts together with the industry. So we partnered with Adidas and Puma in so many occasions. But I don't want to share anything specific and granular because for that, I will need to build a huge context for that. What I can say that there are so many public examples of Nike engaging in different areas or any other company that I used to work before. And trust is when you work for a large corporation and you are, meeting with an NGO, trust is on the table. So the first thing to do is to say, that we are here to negotiate or to communicate or to educate, to influence, whatever, but you have to be transparent about your objectives. Working for large corporations, there are this, let's say, expectation that you are, hiding something, or you have much more, resources than anyone. So that was, let's say, a common challenge across different companies and regions.
So what are the challenges then of trust building? Let's say the the common challenges, because you have to deal with internal stakeholders, you have the government. I'm trying to take this from another angle. If you can't be granular, which I understand, discretion is very important in your job, but perhaps you have common things that you would be able to share with our audience here. We by the way have 12 people at the moment, and some really interesting people who are watching you in our community that I would love to introduce you.
Yeah, uh, well, trust is personal and also corporate. So you cannot separate both. If you are dealing with people outside your organization, your name is on the card, it's on the business card. Your name is on the email. So something that I was always conscious is about preserving my integrity and trying to build solid relationships. Um, so there are so many examples. So in Brazil, during my first, let's say, executive experience working for Alcatel, we were influencing the government to privatize the telecom industry, the telecom services in Brazil. You can imagine that, well, you have a self-serving interest in this. Yes, yes, but we also believe that that's good for you, for the country, for the society, etc. So that's an example. So you have to be honest, and you have to deal with a lot of people with different mentalities about you, especially when you represent a multinational from different cultures. And internally, trust is also very important. As a Brazilian, as you can see from my accent, working for French companies and American companies, you also need to build trust about yourself, your views, and your country. And when I moved from Brazil to Europe, Middle East, and Africa, was a different challenge as well. My first visit to Russia to talk about the World Cup 18 was it was a big challenge because I was discovering the country's culture at the same time that I was building capacity over there. The same in Turkey. And then one of the things that for me is the most important thing is to respect local culture. I think in corporate affairs, local is more important than in any other departments in a company, because you have the culture, and the culture is the one that is forming legislation. So legislation is based on culture. The governments are based on culture. So if you really want to make yourself trustable, you have to respect their culture, and that's very important in multinationals.
That's really interesting. I mean, we have here Marva, for example, she's from Egypt today. We have Jean, he's from France, and I think this is so interesting because, for example, what we are building is a community that today is present across 38 markets, right? And it's quite interesting and I mean, I founded the community. I can say in a very pragmatic way. When you speak to an American, they're very direct in certain ways. They expect results overnight. Whereby in Europe, things, in my perception, people they tend to think more longer term, and it's so different how this local nuances they make such a big difference, right? So perhaps if you could touch on this cultural aspects, because you lived in Brazil. I think in Brazil we are, from a cultural standpoint, very adaptable in a way to multiple cultures, right? Given our background, that's my opinion. Many influences. So, based on everything that you lived, Guy, and the cultures you lived, so perhaps some insights on how to cope with the different cultures when you're working in an organization as such.
That's a very important point. I think the first and the most important one is do not focus on people. Focus on your objectives, because it's such in your private life. You have relatives that may sound strange to you, but you have to deal with them. Sometimes you love them, but you don't understand how they decide on things. I can give an example that was very interesting in terms of different cultures. It was the Brexit. Brexit was negotiated between the UK and the European Union. The European Union, by themselves, is a combination, is a group of 27 different member states with different cultures, etc., etc. And then you have the UK with four different, let's say, countries inside, etc., etc. But the UK, the spirit in the UK is an entrepreneurial spirit. They like to take some risks. They like to believe they can, they will. While in the continental Europe, it's more about deciding after making a very strong case. So they will come after data. They will listen to others. They will prepare a long-term plan, and then they will say, "Well, that's what we believe. That's what we want." And that's a little bit different. So I remember meetings about Brexit with both sides of the canal, talking about different things. And I remember the way they were approaching this. So I remember once on a board meeting with board members from both sides, and the board members from the UK/US, because there were some Americans working as well. So they were not reading all the papers. They were not, paying attention to all the details, but they were making the most difficult questions to the CEO. While in the continental Europe, they were coming with very specific questions first. So they would like to be clear about everything. And yes, so the best way to do this is to respect, is not to try to impose your culture. But last and most important, in my opinion, is to respect yourself because you have your own culture. In my case, so I not only Brazilian, but coming from a town in the countryside, from a family that immigrated from the Middle East plus Italy. So I have my own culture, and then I have to be respected as well as much as I respect others.
That's brilliant. Amazing advice and great insight, Guy. Let's talk about your book. Get the memo. So you've been, you left Nike after many years, and now you're a consultant. You're helping CEOs. We had a conversation in private to build trust companies as well. So why you created this book, and what do you, yeah, what do you expect to achieve? What kind of impact would you like to have?
Yeah, so there are different, career paths, for different people. So I admire people that, decided on the career path and stayed on the career path for 30 years. I really admire, and they get the results they want because they, develop a solid and profound knowledge, experience, etc. It's not my case. I like to take some risks, and this book is a big risk. Every book is a big risk, right? What ignited me to write this book is when I saw the word stakeholders becoming, more important than before. I said, okay, I used to work with stakeholders, no transactional stakeholders, for my whole career. I think that is the moment now to come up with something more pragmatic, not only saying beautiful words, but not only making greenwashing or pinkwashing, blackwashing, but to come up with something more concrete. And because of the age of opinion. So we live in the age of opinion. We are part of this as a large corporation or mid to large corporation as well, even small companies. So what I decided to write the book, and I divided the book in three parts. The first one, I act as a reporter. So I tell the stories, true stories, real world cases about different companies such as Disney, Bud Light, and many others. I do not judge. I just say, this is the reality. So if you do not understand that we live in the age of opinion, you'll be, making some mistakes. The second part of the book, I act as a strategist. I talk about laws and compliance and standards and metrics, leadership and culture, and governance, corporate governance. And this is what I believe the company need to follow. And then the third part is more a tactical part. That's what I am trying modestly and but taking some risks to provide a decision framework that I call M.E.M.O, map, execute, measure, and optimize. And it's a dynamic decision making or decision making structure. Then you can start with map, then execute and measure, and then optimize. And then you can do this as a cycle, so as a budget or as a strategic plan. And then I provide all the elements for companies to use Memo. And finally, well, since it is Memo, we come up with the idea of having using the name Get the Memo for the book. The book is on pre-order at Amazon, and it was written originally in US English, and it's available for pre-order. And I believe that we'll be launching, the book by mid-March, at least.
Guy, do you have any what do you call in English? Any it's not bait, but that's the word that came to me. Like like a sample of the book that we could distribute to the community, perhaps with your framework, so people can have the kind of framework that you use, and I'm thinking even about a master class that you could delve into. But do you have something like that so we can share later?
Absolutely. And it's so simple. I will provide to you, and I'll be very happy to respond questions, or if you want me to conduct a work session, workshop session. The most important thing is that I think companies with different sizes in the different industries, they need a more dynamic decision framework. Sometimes I call it decision framework, sometimes I call it strategic governance. I believe in governance. I believe in governance, but governance is about trust. It's the best you can do to build and nurture trust. But governance, it's so complicated, right, Guy? It's expensive. I am too small for having a governance system in my company. I don't want to respond to questions from strangers, etc. So memo is not about this. And it's about you have the control, you have the ability to make informed and agile decisions. And that's the point, without creating more bureaucracy, creating more costs and delay your development. So that's what I would like companies to do, to be focused on what they need to you know to to prosper, to grow.
Hmm. So you mentioned framework versus governance.
Yes.
Is that correct? Yes, yes. So let's explore a little that idea. Let's engage into that idea. Framework versus governance.
Yeah. Well, corporate governance is something that normally you see as a group of people, seasoned people, former executives or other board members, members of the family, etc., making the right questions with a lot of information, etc. But you do not see a framework behind that. And outside the board of directors, outside them, you also have some kind of governance, right? At the executive level, you have the executive team, you have different kind of systems, you have inside sales and marketing and human resources. In any department, you have a system. When you have people, process, performance, and purpose, you have governance. But you don't have a framework sometimes. You have
Hmm.
compliance, you have the rules of engagement, you have silos, departments, fragmentation. So what I'm trying to do is something that is simple for every company, but is based on the four P's that I just mentioned before: people, process, performance, and purpose.
Amazing. Gui, before we invite our um, members to jump in and ask you questions, actually, Marva, she wants to ask you a question. So we live in the age of opinion, right? And just because you
Yes.
can have an opinion, should you? What's your take on that?
Why I recommend in the book that not because you have an opinion that you have to share it irresponsibly. What that means, if you are, representing a company, you are the CEO of a company, and you have to take that into consideration, right? So you are representing a lot of people, your employees, investors, clients. I can give you a very concrete example. More than a year ago, before the Web Summit 2023, the owner of the company decided to engage in a conversation about Gaza. And you may remember that during that day, after hours after his post, um, many companies decided to not participate in the upcoming Web Summit Lisbon. And based on that decision, the owner of the company was asked to leave the company, his company, for a certain period of time. And why is that, in my opinion? Because you may have your opinion, and that's totally normal. You have your opinions about things, but you have to be, you know, conscious that you are representing an institution, either your company, your government, your society, your community. Sorry. So you have to be conscious about that. Also, I always believe in something called knowledge. So I am not an expert on so many things. So why should I have to make opinions about everything, every time, everywhere? This is key. This is what I believe for myself. So I preserve or I preserve my capacity to judge or to analyze on things that I have more familiarity and more knowledge, more experience.
Yeah, I think this is a fascinating conversation because even for us, like building this community, um, I it's my personal belief that a company should lean towards something. I mean, if you're building something, you're not, in my opinion, that's Carlos speaking, the founder of Evolve. You shouldn't try to embrace the world. Like otherwise, you're trying to embrace everyone, and I mean, your company should potentially lean towards a specific either political view or maybe you can be more controversial. Then you're going to attract specific people that align with that view of the world. But we live dangerous times in the sense that you can be canceled at any time, right? So it's it's a really fine line there, like the guy from the same example, G4, G4 in Brazil, Thales. You probably I think saw what happened with him. I think it was he has his opinions, but again, he was representing the company, or he was the CEO, and he was canceled, right? So he had to step back, and they found ways, like they have now they replace him for a women, for a lady who's the CEO. But these are uh, very, very dangerous times where if you emit the something that can be twisted, then you're screwed in a way, because that can be amplified and in in a really, really bad way, right?
Yeah, I am not in favor of politically correct um, approach to life,
Yeah.
especially because this is creating an ideology that is not a universal ideology. I believe in respecting others as much as you can based on your knowledge. Sometimes we say things that we regret after knowing that we did something wrong. And then we have to apologize and say, I was not informed. And really, if you're doing this honestly, I think that's fine. You are learning. The point is, when you say that publicly, you don't have this option anymore.
Mhm.
And be careful. But at the same time, I encourage people to be honest and to be, there is a big difference between integrity and opinion. Integrity is walk the talk.
Mhm.
If you say something, perhaps you have to be something. If you are in favor of something, you have to really believe or act as you are saying.
Precisely,
Otherwise,
and
you
that
are just
yeah. And that's brand. Like it's not a flashy logo, but it's everything you do uh, that composes your brand, that represents your brand as well. So Gui, I'm gonna start inviting our members. So there you go, Marva. Please introduce yourself. You're a new member. Talk a little bit about your background and fire your questions.
Mhm.
Hello, everyone. Hi, Guy, and thank you, Carlos. Yes, it's I've been here just for a couple of days, and this is my first session. So thank you for the insightful talk so far. Very insightful. What I do, I mean, I have been into the. I'm from Egypt, first of all, so based in Egypt, and right now we're expanding our business of SME. Support in terms of business catalysts, consultancy, and advisory, as well as private equity into partnering with German and UAE companies. So this is very fresh coming from experience with our partners. That's what we do now. Um, and an interesting question I actually had for you, because this is what I encounter every day, because we work with a lot of family businesses. So the whole trust subject is always on the table, not because of the culture, but because of the generational gaps now. So, as different generations come into the business, the whole Gen Z coming into the workforce, and there is simply no trust nor understanding between the owners, the managers, the boards, etc. So, what kind of advice do you have that we should actually have in mind as we're approaching businesses with the new generations on board now, since they are very opinionated in many terms, not always very knowledgeable, maybe, but definitely they have their opinion. And of course, the knowledge gap that we know by now exists between the two generations. So,
Nice to meet you, Marva. And thank you for this very, 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 very important question. So I do have some experience in successions. And that's exactly what you are saying. I think that in many, many countries in the world, probably globally. And I do believe that at the same time that you have to respect every opinion, you have to come up with a baseline and say what is your interest. And then you have to come, in my opinion. So what I do, I'm not saying that you have to do, but what I do is I start with the fundamentals. It's a for-profit organization. Yes. So if it's not a non-profit, it's a for-profit. If it's a for-profit, you have to think about, the longevity of your company. And then you have to think about quarters versus years, or even better, quarters and years and decades. So I do believe that when you put such a let's say different time frame in front of them, they 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 sometimes they see more, they understand what we are saying, and they understand that they have to build something gradually and not instantly. So I'm not, I don't know if I'm, coming with something concrete to you, but that's what I'm saying. That's what I'm doing, is to come up with something more like interest first, and then build a time frame for that. Was that helpful?
so as I understand, to have a common ground, maybe like you say, where talk more objectively, have a common ground, and then gradually have a plan for that.
Absolutely. Let's say this is the moment. This is the one. This is now. So let's start with this, and then let's build the plan for the succession with some metrics. But first of all, understand the interests, right? We would like to continue to grow at the same basis with the same numbers? Yes. Okay, good. How can we make this transition smooth? How can we start, and then checking and then measuring and then
Mhm.
checking and then measuring? So I do believe that that's my sensation, right? And I'm not saying this is the right approach, but this is my experience, is that the new generations, they would like things right now. I think the most important thing is to say, yes, you are not wrong, but maybe this will take more time. And by the way, along the way, let's make some checkpoints. Then we can see if we are progressing towards your objective, or we may need to make some adjustments. And they will feel comfortable that you are helping them, not against them.
That's making more sense. Yeah. So just gain their trust first of all by just giving them the floor to speak up and to actually share, because this is usually where the whole conflict starts. This whole barrier of very older way of doing business and the generational difference of different understandings. So um, makes sense that this technique so should hopefully work. I mean, talking to the human first, just gaining their trust that way, because
I
it's
was helping,
something that we're always
sorry,
suffering from. Yeah.
sorry, I interrupted you.
No, please go ahead.
No, it
I was
was yeah, it was just me. But go ahead, and I'll take note here. I'll take note, and you guys will read. Sorry.
No, just to give an example, a company that I helped in the region in the south of Germany. Very, 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 very old-fashioned family. The new generations, the new generation. They were coming up with oh, ESG, and we have to go to this, and we have to make differences everywhere, etc. And then I remember during a meeting, I was asking about making the difference inside the community. And that was something that their parents, the founders, were not the founders, but the representatives of the founders were saying, we have a strong relationship with the community. We cannot just say no to them right now. And they were very sensible to this point. So we have, yes, Martha, we have to open, but we have to conduct and facilitate the communication and going into direction of mutual interest, not personal opinions.
Very insightful. Thank you for that. That
It takes
helps.
time.
Yeah, definitely does. We need more patience, I guess. Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you.
Actually, yeah, I just posed a question to you both here, Guy and Marva and Hawan, who's going to join our stage as well. But for example, in regards to the new generations, because of the internet and access to multiple sources of influence nowadays, especially, let's say, uh, e Egypt, there's and out of I'm exploring my curiosity here. The religion, right? There's a religion aspect as well. So given all of that, all of those influences, does that make it more challenging, Marva and Guy, like to let's say to cope with the new generation? I'm curious to engage in that discussion.
Well, if I may share my point of view on that, here in Egypt, the differences are quite loud. Yes, I mean, there is a lot of bias when it comes to religions and beliefs. I do believe it's that as humans we just need to be a little bit less judging as we do that, as we do so. The younger generations are much less when it comes to actually judging and pinpointing. They actually are much more unfiltered, I guess. They don't have these layers that a lot of the older generations have. The old beliefs and the judging is, it's actually not there as much as the youngsters. So I do believe, yes, in our part of the world, this is going on, pointing fingers and labeling, that we need to put aside if we actually want to get through a little bit easier, and build that trust, building on what Guy was saying, that we need to help ourselves to help them, at the end of the art. It's all in the mind, the way we are actually seeing people and how we're working with them, needs to change in order to get a common ground. And I do speak for my most of the people that I do work with, because the elder generations are usually, yes, they're not helping themselves actually with the big barriers that they have with their family members. So makes very good sense. I could relate to that.
And Carlos, complementing, if I can, what Marva just said, that I totally agree. Different perspectives, like you build a company or you were successful and now you have children and the new generation, and they are coming with new ideas, but success is on your side as the previous generation, right? And then you have a different kind of view. You like to see the past and the present, but the present and the past. Past is a very important component. The new generation, they would like to see the present and the future, mostly focused on the future. So that's why a time frame, in my opinion, works better, because you have to make the case that it worked so far. Congratulations, but now you may have different challenges and different kind of leadership, etc. That's very delicate, especially when you are talking about people with beliefs that you have to do exactly as I did, as my father did, my grandfather, etc. So you have ways to approach this, but that's working on my experience.
That's amazing. Great insight. And there's family. I also have business in my family, so I can completely relate to what you're saying, what you're both saying. Regardless country, I think the challenges are the same, right? The person who founded the company and the new ideas emerging and the challenges, all the clash that you see there. So thank you. Hawan, your turn. Welcome, Hawan. Hawan is a very active member, so good to see you, man.
Good to see you. Thank you, Guy. Thank you, Marva. Great session, Guy. Thank you for sharing your great experience. It's really nice to meet you again. And I'd like to ask about putting your knowledge in a perspective of entrepreneur or leading small teams inside big companies, like an intra-entrepreneur. How would you say would be the fundamental points to build trust inside these small groups? Would be like be walk what you say, be genuine. What would be the fundamental points to build trust in small groups, not only for the outside of the company, but inside the company to build a solid perspective?
Hi, Owen. Very good question. Normally, in a small business, you have a more personal relationship. And something that I recommend talking to people from my family and others is try to keep your how can I say your fears and your desires to yourself as much as you can. Be cautious that they could they could be your friends in your company, but they also need your success for their salaries and bonuses, etc. So um, be more focused on the acting, executing, listen to everyone, make sure that you have to take you are the responsible for you are the ultimate responsible for deciding about your company. But I think the most important thing is to not try to engage them as a friend. It's they are good colleagues, close colleagues, but um, they are not sharing the same life that you are having. They are with you, not they are not you.
Yeah, that make great sense. Thank you, Guy. Thank you for your advice.
My pleasure.
All right. Marva, do you have more questions? Anyone in the audience? Would you like to take this moment and engage with Guilherme? This is a really nice and unique opportunity that we all have. Barbara cannot. She can join in. Um, Hawan, if you have more questions, Marva, you're very welcome. We have here typically 60 minutes. We are on 48 minutes, so go ahead.
Do
No
you
questions.
want
All
to
right.
ask, Margot?
Thank you. No
Let me
question.
no. Yeah.
Carlos, let me give you some more details about the book. Based on your question about granular examples and my answer about be let's say more cautious about sharing sensitive information and be discreet. So what I did in the book is I created a fictional case based on real life. So there is a company called Kali's Food, and Kali's Food is a fictional company, but a company with so many, let's say, true facts from different experiences. And that's interesting because with Kali's food, and Kali's food is part of the book. It's not the whole book. It's like by the end of each chapter, we go to the Kali's food example, and then you see what's going on there. But then you have different situations, like you just mentioned, about someone that was aggressive against a woman, replaced it by a woman. And then what was the real objective of doing that by the board members, the founders, the old generation, the new generation? Interesting things. Based on everything that we are discussing today, it's very common to have this kind of questions. And that's why I think it's interesting to have a fictional case based on true facts or real life.
100%. And I mean, we are seeing this facts unfold right before us right now, like worldwide, right? Like so many companies that are facing crisis management. Let's put it this way. I think you're always exposed. If you're on social media, especially, and there's no way today of not being on social media. Maybe there is, but people don't watch television anymore, or they do, but the attention is in social, right? So I have always been against, being perfectly honest, against what do you call, like a social media, crisis management committee. I think that was the word. However, they are important as well, like, because we are all exposed and we never know when we could emit an opinion that might be misunderstood, or that we made a mistake, like happened. So I don't have how to conclude, but I just think these are very interesting times. And yeah, I don't know how you would what are your views on? I think we touch on all the points, but crisis management. What's your take on this, Guy, on a crisis management committee?
I think crisis, let's say reputational crisis. I don't like the word reputation, but let's use the jargon. Reputational crisis is not about if, it's about when. It will happen. It's happening every time. Maybe you don't see it. Maybe you will see it. There is an example of call center operator that I like. Emily James was working for a US bank called US Bank. And she was working on Christmas Eve when she received a phone call from a client saying, "I'm sorry, I need my money. I am trying to fulfill my tank. I'm at a gas station with my wife and daughter. It's minus 17 Celsius degree outside. It's very cold. And I do have money, but I don't know why my credit card is not working." And then she said, "Yes, I understand. There is a delay between, making a deposit and having your money available." So the guy was not aggressive. He was not asking anything different than, "It's my money and I need it because otherwise I will have a health issue here with my wife and daughter in this car, in this temperature." So Emily James decided to talk to her supervisor, and he agreed, and she left the US Bank office call center in Portland, Oregon, and she drove to the gas station and gave to the client $20. She was fired, either her supervisor, because they were not following the bank's compliance. They were risking their lives they were risking companies, I don't know, access or to the perimeters, whatever. So Emily James was a very discreet woman. She didn't make a case about it, but her friends started to make some comments on social media about the situation. They were saying, well, Emily James was always the employee of the month, employee of the year. She didn't deserve it. So the local newspaper, the Oregonian, decided to make a small article about the situation. And then maybe that was it, right? So compliance is no one criticizes compliance, right? No one critiques the power of compliance. Otherwise, you have to be compliant with everything. What happened is this: Nicholas Kristof, a New York Times columnist, I think he was the first one in New York Times to have a personal blog. He is from Portland, and he normally reads his old town newspaper. So he was aware about this case. And because he works at the New York Times, he decided to use this story for his own, profession as a journalist. So he called Emily James, he talked to her supervisor, he talked to the client, and then he called the US Bank CEO. But of course, the CEO was not aware about it. And the CEO was not attending the telephone because, of course, this was a call center operator issue, right? So someone from HR said, "Thank you very much for raising this question." This kind of corporate jargon. We follow our compliance, etc., etc. So the next day, the New York Times published an article about the US Bank case where a call center operator decided to help a client with her personal money, and she was fired, even though the bank's motto is we do everything for our client. So the irony was there, but not there, in the local newspaper, but was there in the New York Times newspaper. So what happened is during that day, the US bank CEO probably decided to open his agenda because he talked to the New York Times to explain, oh, no, this is not what we are. This is not representing us. And I would like Emily James to join us again. And then the journalist called Emily James and said, are you planning to join? They are offering you your job back, etc. And she said, no, I already have a new job, and I do believe that I can do better for the society in my new job. So end of story. This situation was not helpful for the US Bank image. And it was a national, let's say, news. Many other newspapers in the country followed that story, even in the UK. But my point here is, yes, you cannot control with even when you have a solid compliance system.
Yeah.
So what you do, you
Sorry,
just
go ahead. Go ahead.
yeah, what you do is just to be honest and to be trustful and say, maybe this is a mistake. We'll change things next time. We change process, and maybe the right answer to that. But again, you are not because you are following compliance metrics and standards and governance, you are not vulnerable to crisis or reputational crisis.
Amazing, thank you. I was actually writing here. Zappos, the founder, was a great example of just trusting people and giving them the benefit of the doubt, because you're going to create promoters when you look at customers, right? Like Tony Hsieh was a great example of, he would pay for a freaking pizza, and then you would have a customer promoting your brand, right? But to me, that's very basic, and I think we tend to overcomplicate, especially like listed companies. Yes, they're more things at stake. But when people feel that they're treated well, I mean, in the end, it's basic, right? It's like giving people, trusting people, doing good. It's cheaper. It's simple. It's simply cheaper, right? You're not in the front of New York Times, you know, being demonized and whatnot. So I don't know. Could be easier at times.
Absolutely. Zappos is one of the great examples in my book as well.
All right. So Guy, I'll turn on my camera just to thank you. Thank you very much for this. Another expert session. So if our members and who's not a member, they want to know more about you, what's the best way? Of course, a lot of them, they are in the community. We're going to promote this within the community, but also outside of the community. So what's the best way to find you and find your work?
My website, it's my name. I can write somewhere here.
We can put
Is
it
that
in
a
the
chat?
comments. Yeah, there is a
Okay,
chat, but
yeah.
I put it in the comments on YouTube, so no worries.
And LinkedIn, of course. I really like to interact. Besides my corporate career, I used to teach for 22 years consecutively in MBAs and post-graduation programs. Now in Europe, living in Europe, I used to teach during the summer period. The last program was based on the age of opinion for students from 10 different universities together. And it was a very challenging, very interesting conversation. So I like different opinions. I like to be challenged. I really like it. And so please feel free to engage, and it will be a pleasure.
Fantastic. Another expert session. Thank you all for today, and I see you soon. I'm pausing the session now.
Thank you all.
Thanks.
Bye. Bye, Carlos. Obrigado.
Bye. Valeu.